Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we are an integral part, and with deep gratitude to all of our ancestors that have brought us to the present moment, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we embark on our fall program after a month off in the month of August while we made pilgrimage to the sacred site of Chartres, which carries such a potent energy of the sacred feminine. There were 92 of us all together in the end, and we had an extraordinary encounter with the mother, and we were all refreshed, and it's so good to be back with all of you as we commence the next 3 or 4 months of programming on Humanity Rising. We at Humanity Rising believe that the single most important thing that humanity can do right now, given the challenges that confront us, the rising ecological turbulence, the increasing fragility of our global institutions, the rising cultural strife, the dysfunction of our media all around, humanity nevertheless must rise. And we rise together, in our view, from the inside out. So we are commencing our program with 4 days of regenerative health, where we're looking at how we, on our own, just doing practices that have been known for thousands of years, East and West, that we can rejuvenate our spirits, we can animate the vitality of our bodies, and we can collaborate more heartfully one with another at this crucial moment when it looks like our governments aren't going to do what is necessary. So we, the people, have to find our way. And the most extraordinary thing about Humanity Rising, having convened now, this is our 534th session, is that there is goodness all over the world. And there is optimism. There are people that are unfolding and developing solutions both at local levels but also scaling globally. So it is a rich time to be alive, and we want to be part of it day by day as we bring you ways that we can be more vital and be more collaborative at a global level. One of the things that we've been doing as we've begun our fall programming is an exercise in coherent breathing. From our very first program back on May 22nd, 2020, in the depths of the pandemic, we've done heart coherence meditation because we believe that at the heart of Humanity Rising is the coherence of the heart. And more recently, as we've now engaged in, I would say, an exponential increase in the turbulence globally, and we're now not only in code red in terms of climate, but we're in code red at multiple levels, whether it's democracy, whether it's war, whether it's public health. We are wanting to bring to your attention a particular way of breathing that is very ancient, but which science is now gathering data about as an optimal way to increase heart coherence and increase the resonance between the heart and your brain, as well as bringing coherence to your most fundamental body systems. So it's a way in a very short period of time, simply by breathing, that everything you want to do in terms of improving your health and well-being is effectuated and animated. And it's very simple. And it's a breathing where you inhale very slowly for about 5.5 seconds. And then you exhale very slowly for about 5.5 seconds. And we're going to do it for about 3 minutes. And the wonderful thing of doing it is that you can feel the effect instantly. That's how powerful the breath is in animating the body. I always remind myself that the Buddha said that the pathway to enlightenment begins with the breath. So we're going to upgrade our practice on cohering the heart by breathing in the heart. And so Georg will now ring some bells, and you'll hear a bell, and then just start to inhale for about 5.5 seconds. And then you'll hear another bell and just exhale. If you find that challenging, no worries. The main thing is to inhale slowly, exhale slowly at your own pace, guided by the bells. And in 3 minutes, you'll feel better about yourself and the world. I guarantee you. Thank you so much. Georg, let us begin. Thank you, everyone. Now, with a heart full of love for all of you and deep gratitude for all of you gathered here today, with love and gratitude for Mother Nature, of which we are a part, and the awareness that our dialogue today is nature talking with itself. I want to welcome Stephanie Mines, who has been convening our program. This is the third of 4 days of the program on regenerative health, dealing particularly with burnout and how we can transform burnout into buoyancy and vitality. Stephanie is a PhD in embryology and neuroscience, so she brings not only deep heartfulness and mystical awareness, but the rigor of scientific discipline to these matters. So Stephanie, I want to thank you for opening up our fall program here on Humanity Rising. We're going to delve into an issue today, everyone, on post-traumatic stress syndrome and disorder that actually afflicts all of us one way or another. So this is a particularly important part of our 4-day program. So Stephanie, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Jim. I'm so grateful for the way you are beginning these programs. You are correct. They deepen the alignment that I feel with my own heart and with the heart of nature. This is a profoundly feminine perspective on burnout. And if you want to know about burnout, ask the feminine. We have carried that lineage for a long time. We know what it feels like. We know how our organs are affected. We know how our nervous system is affected, and we know how to transform it. Necessity is the mother of invention. We are the mother of innovation in antidoting burnout. I want to share with you today the continuation of what we initiated yesterday. Yesterday, we addressed the water element, the kidney and bladder meridians, the adrenal system. And I mentioned that there is a domino effect, you might say. My beloved teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, who transmitted the wisdom of the bioelectrical fields of the human body to me out of the lineage she inherited from Jiro Murai, passed to her, that she passed to me. She spoke of the fact that no one actually suffers from a heart attack. They're actually having a kidney attack. And what she meant was that the depletion of the water element, the depletion of the adrenal system, has to precede any impact on the heart. So when the water element, the adrenal system, is so depleted, so overwhelmed, so ruthlessly attacked as burnout would reflect, then the next point of burden is the pericardium, the heart protector. The pericardium is a sac that surrounds the heart known as the empress, I would call it. Our Chinese medicine calls it the governor. I call it the empress of all our organic functions and of our spiritual nature as well. So the pericardium is the second line of defense. Once that line of defense is breached, you then have an extremely vulnerable heart prone to heart attack. So I want to share with you an aspect of this bioelectrical reawakening, re-stimulation, recalibration that is available in the TAR approach, the heart of the regenerative health. That word heart keeps reoccurring because the heart, I just want to interject this before I go further. The heart and the brain and the kidney all evolve out of the same structure. So embryologically, the neural crest cells that migrate into the kidney also migrate into the heart. So this is one system. And the part of the bioelectrical medicine that I'm offering you is something called Inju. So Inju are mudras or hand postures. And Jiro Murai, who transmitted the system to Mary Eno Burmeister, began his own recovery from burnout in the form of leukemia, which he was told he would die from. He began the reversal of that prophecy by practicing Inju. So Inju is a meeting with yourself. It is a form of self-transformation. Through conscious attention and self-contact, deeply empowering self-contact, your own energy reorganizes to help you find your way home to your true self. Inju serves very physical needs. This entire system is incredibly practical. So those needs include alleviating fatigue, reducing stress, increasing immune strength, etc. All physical needs, literally. Ultimately, though, the purpose of Inju is to heighten spiritual awareness by awakening you to your essence. Inju derived from a variety of ancient sources, but their origin is sacred wisdom. You will be learning several Inju here, even more in the forthcoming courses. And if you repeat these postures as frequently as possible, and it's easy to do so, you will maintain, you will sustain focused concentration, and that coherent breathing that Jim is initiating all our programs with will become natural to you. It will become a way of life. So I want to share the Heart Protector Inju with you today, this morning, as our somatic exercise that we will share. These are examples of some of the Inju that we'll be learning. The Heart Protector Inju, which you see down in the lower right-hand side of your screen, is by simply placing any fingers, and you can also use more than one finger. I'm using the index and middle finger. That's what fits nicely in the space, that kind of interstitial space where we frequently treat in this system. And the reason we treat in those interstitial places is that they're excellent conducting tissue. The fascia there conducts energy efficiently. So placing my index and middle finger, you may choose any other finger. I'm putting my right fingertips on the left area between the ring and little finger. And then you just can bring your hands to a comfortable place. So I am going to suggest that we do the coherent breathing for a minute as you hold the Heart Protector Inju in a comfortable way. You may notice some tenderness in that area. Don't press, don't rub, just be there. And you will observe that tenderness easing as the tension in the tissue releases and disperses. So 1 minute, please, of the coherent breathing at your own pace as you hold the Heart Protector Inju. and you can seal your practice, noticing how the entire web of alignment and unification has been activated throughout your being with the prayer in you. Bringing the palms of your hands together and the pads of all the fingers, letting them make an intimacy with one another, right to left, left to right, and placing your hand in the prayer in you anywhere you feel the need. So that could be at your heart center to further expand your compassion. It could be in the center of your forehead to increase your focus. Or if you have some stress anywhere in your body, you can place the prayer in you in that area, just outside the place that is suffering from discomfort. Please feel free to share the heart protector in you with anyone who needs it or who would like to strengthen their heart protector. Anyone who is having stress in the heart will benefit from the heart protector in you. And what I want to say about this whole process that we initiate today is that we are stepping much more deeply into the material that is the curriculum for the Ubiquity program and all the Tara Approach programs, which is personal transformation. So this movement from deep within to service in the collective in whatever form that takes for you. And that could be the form of serving your family. It doesn't have to be serving the world or a community. It can be that, but it can be service to yourself, the self-care that Nalini has described so beautifully in this series, or service to your family. So that movement is begun in a deeply personal way. And that is really the aim of the Ubiquity program and all the Tara Approach programs. I want to be connected to every student who wants to learn the Tara Approach, who wants to experience and transmit regenerative health. I am really committed to individuals. It is individual transformation that inspires me and motivates me. In order to go through this transformational process in which you regenerate your nervous system, so you move beyond your epigenetic inheritance into your essence. So your conception ignited the essence of your manifestation, and then the epigenetic fields burden and obscure that essential self. We reclaim that essence by removing those burdens. In the Ubiquity program, we will develop a personal exposome. So exposome is the history of your exposures. And we do this not to tell these old stories again, but to alchemize them through the bioelectrical practices and the concentration, the focus that evolves out of those practices. So the Inju are an incredibly efficient way to do that. And we'll be learning more Inju later today. And of course, we go much further in the courses that are available through Ubiquity and also through the Tara Approach. So I want to welcome today both my wonderful collaborator, Nalini Yadav, who is of great help with the technical components here, but who is also an advanced Tara Approach practitioner and a collaborator with me in developing the ideas and the content for this program. And then I want to introduce a dear friend, someone who I call a sister, Cynde Collins-Clark, who will be speaking with us today about post-traumatic stress disorder and caregivers of those living with what is more aptly described as post-combat shock. My relationship with Cynde is both personal and collective. The story, as I just said to her earlier, will live with me forever, of how we came together. She and her son, Joe Collins, are inspirations for my book, They Were Families, How Work Comes Home, and the founding of Veterans Families United, which I am honored to be part of. I met Cynde in the heartland of America, Oklahoma, home of my favorite poet, one of my most esteemed mentors, Joy Harjo. And I traveled there to teach regenerative health and had an amazing experience when a name was on the schedule at a clinic where I was teaching and being of service. And that individual, Joe Collins, didn't show up for his appointment. And that led me ultimately to reaching out and meeting Cynde Collins-Clark. And out of that has come this book, this organization, this mission of service to veterans and their families. If we are truly going to take a bold look at burnout, we must look at the lives of our veterans and their family members. When I was in Oklahoma, I was also doing clinical research. And that research was into neurodiversity. And what I discovered, and this was simultaneous with the time that I met Cynde, so it's an incredible constellation of events that clearly were orchestrated beyond our conscious mind. In my neurodiversity research, which focused on autism and children between the ages of 5 and 11, I learned that the children of veterans are 80% more afflicted with neurodiversity, primarily autism, than the general population. That was astounding statistically, but it also woke me up to my own history. I am the daughter of a veteran. I am the sister of a veteran. My brother was just buried in a military service, in a military cemetery. And understanding the reverberations of that military service, what it did to my father and my brother neurologically, is astounding in reflecting on my own development, the development of my family, and the development of many other families. I researched that in the clinical trials that I conducted, but I watched it and became, I would say, part of the family of Veterans Families United in Oklahoma. Cynde Collins-Clark is a counselor, a therapist, a deeply compassionate human being. I call her my chaplain. She is also the mother of Joe Collins, who served in the war in Iraq and came home a different person to a family that never abandoned him despite the difficulties that he had as a result of his service. I'd like to bring forward Cynde Collins-Clark, who can share with you in her unique heartland way the merger of caregiver burnout and the experience of post-combat shock. Welcome, Sis. I call her Sis because her dad told me to call her Sis. Cynde's dad was the dad I always wanted. And Cynde has graciously, many times, shared him with me. Over to you, Sis.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for such a heartfelt and true description of not only our loving relationship and the convergence of it, but of the challenges that we sometimes are aware of and sometimes not when war is brought home, using the title of your book. I'm not sure if the technical crew is queued up, but I think as an introduction to what I have to share about caregiving and that wonderful, precious introduction that you gave me, Stephanie, about not abandoning Joe, it feels helpful to share Joe's side of the story, things that I didn't know, I wasn't aware of when he came home. So I think as practitioners, as family members of the earth, the more information that we have about what's really going on, the more empowered we are to tend to it with kindness and gentleness and heart center. So this video was taken, actually it was an interview with Ronan Farrow on CSNBC, and it was 10 years ago that this particular video was done, or 8 to 10 years ago. But it kind of shows Joe's state about 7 years. I've been a caregiver for 17 years. So this is 7 years into his healing journey, maybe 10 years into his healing journey. But I hope it gives a framework for where we will begin on the other side of the coin with caregiver burnout. Go ahead and roll it.
This morning, Vice President Joe Biden honored veterans at the Tomb of the Unknowns in Washington.
We stand here today committed to show our respect, to honor, and to recognize our responsibility to care for all our veterans and for those who continue in harm's way as I speak to you today.
The graves he walked through at Arlington are a stark reminder of the physical casualties of war. But countless other veterans bear invisible scars. Look at this number, 80 minutes. Every 80 minutes, a veteran takes his or her own life. And 239,174 veterans have been officially diagnosed with post-traumatic stress just since 2001. That is, and this is important, diagnosed. The actual number exhibiting symptoms likely far, far higher. One veteran trying to put a spotlight on this silent scourge is Iraq War veteran, retired specialist Joe Collins, and his group, the Veterans Families United Foundation. Joe, I really appreciate your service and your taking the time to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Joe, this isn't an easy topic to talk about. That's one reason why I'm so grateful you're doing this and being so candid. But for those just getting familiar with this issue, explain the kind of trauma you face that can leave this lasting psychological burden.
Well, you know, a few experiences that I went through when I got deployed, I saw, you know, a small child get killed for no reason. He had a little wooden American flag on a stick, and his own people ran him down because he was, you know, waving it at us and like we were a parade going by. I can remember another incident that we found some Iraqis that were laying some mines down in a rock quarry, and there were 3 of them, and we ended up getting into a firefight, and those men lost their lives. And, you know, I was 19 years old when all this happened, I came back home after spending a year and 1 day in country, and I was just 20. And so as much time as I spent prepping myself and as much time as the military spent training me, I was still a kid, you know, and nobody should have to go through those experiences.
I can only imagine how those experiences would stay with one. I'm so sorry for what you have gone through. What ongoing effect has PTSD had in your life?
Well, you know, luckily I have a very supportive family. I thank God for that. It's definitely cost me, you know, the past decade of my life to go to treatment, get counseling, spend, you know, money getting put into an inpatient facility. It's just pretty much been debilitating. At the beginning of this, I actually was bedridden for 3.5 years, completely isolated, only came out of my room maybe 5 to 7 hours a week, and that was to go to the counselor and to the therapist. So it's taken a huge toll. One area that I'm very lucky at is I didn't have a family of my own, and you know, I pray for those that come back that are married with children. I can't imagine that kind of burden coming back and going through those issues when you have your own family that depends on you.
And for every person bearing this weight that you're talking about who seeks help, as you did, you mentioned counseling, for instance, there are countless who are struggling with this and have not sought help. And that's one thing that struck me in our earlier conversations, just how hard it can be to square military culture with seeking help.
Well, you know, there's two good reasons for that. One, when you are in the military and you go through all of those terrible things, you're sacrificing, you know, an enormous part of your life for your military career. And the second you open your mouth, you get flagged down as a, you know, a psychological case. You could lose your security clearance. It could stop possible promotions. Most likely, it'll end up costing you your military career. That's one major reason a lot of people don't speak out. The other, you know, some people don't really know that they have the illness. They don't. They're not able to connect the dots. When I came home from my deployment, I didn't understand what was happening to me. I was isolated. I slept in my closet of my home. I was anxious all the time. You know, I had memory problems, paranoia, a major sleep disorder problem. I'd go 3 or 4 days without sleep. And so, you know, it's kind of two different battles that are being fought. And, you know, it's which sacrifice do you want to make? Do you want to cost yourself your career by opening up? Or, you know, are you able to even understand what's happening to you in the first place?
Well, thank you for your candor about these incredibly difficult issues. Retired Specialist Joe Collins, I'm so sorry for the toll this has taken in your life, and I'm so grateful for your service. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
And if you are moved by this story and others like it we're bringing you this week, there's something you can do. For this week's call to action, we're asking to help veterans break free of the stigma of PTSD. One specific policy area you can help push forward: the Pentagon has just allowed new consideration for veterans with PTSD who may have been dishonorably discharged. We want to spread the word on that. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal wrote a column about it over the weekend. We had him on our show yesterday to talk about this and posted a link on our website, ronandaily.msnbc.com. Share that link on Twitter, on Facebook. Just use the hashtag RoNation. We want to create a firestorm online.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back, and thank you, Cynde. Please continue.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate the opportunity to share that part of the story. many of the things that Joe described in that short interview, of course, were unbeknownst to me. Many veterans feign a wellness for the reasons that he mentioned. What shortly, so sorry about that. I thought I turned that off. What was challenging for me was as a parent of a single veteran, I had very little legal input, or I actually didn't really know what was happening. My husband and I were at work one day and I got a call and his boss said, something is wrong. He hasn't shown up for work, which is what was very contrary to his behavior. And I went to his home, took him to the emergency room, and he never went back to work after that. He lost his job, he lost his home, and it has taken, we're now at year 17, and it has taken those 17 years for him to gain momentum back into healing. Part of what Stephanie shared at the very beginning about the convergence of our meeting was very early on. And it was around 2006 that I met Stephanie, and I ended up taking Joe to see her. And it was through that experience that I became aware. Of course, I'm a counselor on the clinical side, but I became more aware of some interventions and therapeutic modalities that were non-traditional, and that also I learned a little bit more about the depth of Joe's illness. After Joe had his appointment, I made an appointment, and what I realized for myself was that I was in shock and trauma as a caregiver. So that first 5 year, I kind of look at the 17 years of caregiving in trimesters, almost a labor of supporting my son back into healing, but also becoming in touch with what I, as a caregiver, learned about my own shock and trauma. And so in those first 5 years, I went to what I knew, because often that's what we do. And what I knew was I needed to get therapeutic intervention for myself. So every week for 5 years, I would go to my own counseling, take my son to his, those 3 to 5 hours that he was talking about, and be able, in the counseling, really there was nothing that was going on except me decompressing all of the enormity of what I was faced with. The complexity of the systems of care are enormous. Added to that were the complexities of the systems of care of the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, and being not legally, my son being of legal age. So as a caregiver, I was constantly looking for, what can I do to keep my cup full in the midst of the assaults? And I think Jim did a wonderful job in the intro talking about, we're faced with this all over the world right now. The focus, very much of the focus is on Ukraine, but there's war going on everywhere. And so these complex systems, the situations that are occurring in the world, and then this opportunity of how do we meet that, not only in care of ourselves, how do we hold it together and move forward. So in that first trimester, the first 5 years for me, it was primarily survival. And in that survival, the convergence of wonderful people like Stephanie, like the therapist that I had, I began doing my own body work. And when I say my own body work, the only thing that I knew was massage. So I knew that something needed to be processed out and through my body, because what happens when war comes home? By the way, Joe had when he came back, he owned his own home and he had a full-time job. He lost all of that and came in and moved with us, and he's been with us for 17 years. So what you bring into the home is this energetic system that holds all of the shock and trauma. And so you have war, this residue, this energetic residue in your home. So it was a constant awareness for me as a caregiver to be attuned to that and to do everything I could to counterbalance that. In the next 5 years, so the first 5 years was him in total isolation. The next 5 years he had more physical illnesses. All the time I was working and trying to find some sense of equilibrium. And I was led to a spiritual retreat center that is close to my home in Osage County in Oklahoma. And it was there that I was able to, with the support of my husband, to leave and gain respite in the stillness of that contemplative retreat center, communing with nature and communing with the labyrinths, the wonderful tools that they had. So as a caregiver, always looking for things to fill me up, to be restorative. During that time, Joe lost all of his teeth. He was diagnosed with lower extremity lymphedema. So there were a lot of geriatric illnesses, perhaps we think maybe from some exposures to chemicals and whatnot. So not only was there the mental, but there was physical going on. But once again, that ripple effect to the family. How do I care for me? Trying to identify and support. And Joe said something really important in the interview as well, is the balance, or the gift that we have to give one another in mutual support when we recognize that there is imbalance or disequilibrium, and his awareness that the gift of our family, of the love that we had for him, is something that we all have the opportunity to invite in our own hearts and then participate in the global community. So the third 5 years, or this last 7 years, has been Joe moving towards wellness. So this 1 year of his life, 17 years of mental, physical residue, how to meet that residue with loving kindness and tenderheartedness for myself, how to meet the residue of frustration and anger with systems, with hope, and with open-heartedness. And the bounty that, and the unexpected fruits of those efforts that he now has begun to blossom and is in school himself and is opening his own business. So many of the families that I know and love have lost their warrior loved one who did not have the resources or maybe the support, or just in so much pain they did not know how to navigate through this heaviness that can only be made lighter when we're all carrying it together. So I am grateful for this opportunity to share this very ancient story. As Stephanie and Jim both alluded to, this is an ancient story. And this incredible time in history where we have the opportunity to acknowledge it, and to acknowledge it maybe in some ancient ways and some new ways, but in a collective that supports and uplifts one another. So thank you for offering me the opportunity to share my caregiving journey and how important it is as a caregiver to be in tune, how we're all caregivers of one another. And that requires that self-care and then the support of one another. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Jim.
Cynde, so much comes up for me as we revisit our beginnings. I want to mention those who have taken their own lives. I want to mention Cody Green, to whom my book is dedicated. I want to mention my friend, Tom McKinley, who took his own life as a veteran, and all the others. Let those names, Cody Green, Tom McKinley, let those names speak for all those who got lost in the nighttime of being disrespected and dishonored and not given the care that your family so generously and unquestionably continued to offer Joe. Your dedication has become really the model for Veterans Families United. Cynde didn't speak too much about Veterans Families United, but she formed that organization. I'm honored to be on the board. And she provides the resources that she collated through this difficult journey she went on, through going through the incredibly circuitous bureaucratic rigmarole that makes it close to impossible for veterans to get the care that they deserve, that they need. And sadly, that care through those systems, those established systems, and we have so many reports of this, frequently worsen the conditions. And the backlash of all of that is left with family members, those that can have the skills that Cynde cultivated and that she now shares. Can you say something about the kind of response that you get to Veterans Families United, the kinds of queries and needs that you encounter through Veterans Families United?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Stephanie. And I also just need to share this part about our journey together. I was on the table being treated by Stephanie when tears rolled down my eyes from just the sense of deep overwhelm. And Stephanie said to me, I will be there for you. I will walk this journey with you. And not once, never in 17 years has she stepped away from that commitment. That is care and community, the essence of it. So Stephanie was the encourager, the lifted me up in that time of such darkness and overwhelm by holding my hand through it. She was also the one who said, I will help you begin Veterans Families United. She was also the one who helped come up with the name, because oftentimes all of that was so elusive to me because I was on survival mode. You ask about the kinds of queries that we have, Stephanie. Right now, I also want to say that our organization is 100% volunteer. Never in the years that we've been operating has there been a paid position. So we have operated this from the grassroots level. And at this time, we have about 100,000 visits to our site. unsolicited, without any resources coming to see what resources that we have available. And one of the reasons I believe they come is because we do not require any information from them. Speaking to Joe's fear and paranoia, that we don't capture any information, we don't request any information, it's just out there for them, our journey. Many of the stories are of the bureaucratic system, the sense of overwhelm and loss of bearings. You can't even get your bearings because the systems are so complex. Sometimes to be honest with you, I actually kept recordings of conversations that I had early on, because at first it was like, am I hearing this right? I'm like, this doesn't seem like it's making sense. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm not hearing this right. And then I would play it back to myself and I'm like, yes, that was as convoluted and confused. Who could manage? Anyone who's sick, how could they manage to even get through that? Much less someone who didn't know the language of the military. So you have to learn a new language. I had to learn the new language of the military and the VA. So many of the calls that we get are either from veterans or from family members who are just so despondent, despairing, and lost in the systems, knowing that something is wrong, but not knowing what to do about it. Full of fear and confusion, betrayal, sorrow, and this opportunity to connect with them from the heart level, validate them, and then offer them types of empowerment that can encourage them to move forward.
So Cynde is a warrior. She has battled this system. She has confronted them. She is speaking in a very humble way, but she has fought tooth and nail with that system. And then she has collated, documented what she discovered works for families so that they don't have to go through that agony, which quite honestly takes a lot of people down. They don't make it through. They give up. And that's what leads to the despair. The other thing that Cynde has done that is remarkable is she has mastered the art of respite. And that is something I want to speak to because it is a component of the Ubiquity program on burnout. We will each in that program create our individuated respite niche. This is the exposome for human exposures and the respite niche, and how one constructs a respite niche that is specific to you. These are protocols I've developed. They don't exist elsewhere, so I will debrief them for you in the programs. But the exposome that gives you a highly personalized understanding of the historical conditions that led to this incredible vulnerability that you have to burnout. And then the respite niche that matches your unique exposome is what you come out of that program with. And the model for that is Cynde. Even in just the email exchange we had prior to this program, she itemized for me her respite plans. And I am just thrilled when she does that. We're now talking our personal relationship. She triggers in me, oh, I got to do that for myself. I got to create that respite niche that she is modeling. So that respite niche, it goes back to what Nalini said the other day, that it is not selfishness. And, you know, when you're in the midst of the caregiver responsibility in your home. It's your family members. The temptation to just be submerged in the magnitude of that need is huge. You get sucked into it, and being able to pull yourself out of it into a respite niche because you understand how that has happened, and the consciousness that evolves from that is really the subject matter of the Ubiquity course, the one that takes you from burnout to buoyancy. So I can't find the words that express the gratitude and connection that I have with Cynde as a model of respite, as a sister, and to the entire Veterans Families United board that I am so grateful to have in my life. These are veterans. These are family members of veterans who are on this board, and we come together and we pray and we honor one another, and we are dedicated to providing the resources that Veterans Families United offers. So thank you endlessly, my chaplain, my sister.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the opportunity to share this. And thank you for mentioning prayer, because it is my faith. You were talking about the unique respite. It is my faith that I can go back to that stirs in here and says, it's time to go find a space to refill. It's okay to love yourself as you love your son or your husband. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, there you have the heartland. We were speaking earlier. There you have the heartland of America. Please don't pass judgment on Oklahoma. Next time you think of Oklahoma, think of Cynde Collins-Clark. I'd like to bring our panelists in, Nalini and Jim, to just have a dialogue about what we have been experiencing, what we've learned about post-traumatic stress disorder, the interface with the caregiver nervous system and the family contagion. I don't like to use that word because it seems to speak ill of the veteran. I don't mean it in that sense. I mean it in the sense of the transmission that occurs of shock and trauma when you are living with someone who is carrying that, and particularly when it is not articulated, which is unfortunately the tradition. The tradition, I know I come from a family where my father never spoke about his military service. He acted it out instead. And I also come from a family of Holocaust survivors where nothing was ever spoken of. It just permeated the environment. That burden largely falls on children, and therefore the high rate of autism in military families. So with that, questions, comments, please. Jim, Nalini, don't hold back.
Well, I want to just say, Cynde, I found your son's poise during the interview very affirming. You could feel that he'd been into a very deep, dark tunnel, but was working his way through to the other side. So I just, in the first instance, I just want to acknowledge the pathos that you and your husband and your family have probably all lived through as you've tried to support a young man who was too young to have the experiences of brutality to which he was subjected. And so I just wanted to say that in the first instance of deep, and it reminded me of my own situation. This was back in the Vietnam War. I was very much opposed to the war, and I was reviled by my entire family And I can still remember one day we got together for a 4th of July. I think this was 1968, 1969. And there was a cousin named Daryl. And he was actively supporting the Vietnam War. And we had kind of a debate, and I was kind of humiliated for being the only one. And I just said, let's meet back after you come back from Vietnam, because he volunteered for Vietnam. And he went through Agent Orange, and he came back a complete cripple and mentally and emotionally completely destroyed. And when we showed back up in the family reunion on the 4th of July, he was in a wheelchair and he was shaking, his body was shaking. And it was a highly embarrassing moment for me because I didn't go over there, but it was my first experience in the carnage of war and how the public media, the government, the Veterans Administration, all at that time were even in denial about Agent Orange. It took over 40 years for the military even to admit that Agent Orange was causing damage to veterans 40 years back. And so I just felt such deep empathy with your son. And I think the question that I would have is, having gone through this process with not only your son, but others, what progress do you feel has been made in the Veterans Administration, in the Congress, in terms of a sensitivity for an absolute epidemic of PTSD from our veterans coming back, since America has been in almost perpetual war? We have a huge percentage of our population now that is involved in the contagion, Stephanie, that you're talking about. So it's not just the veteran, it's families and it's children. And then when you combine that with just life, you get this transgenerational trauma that Thomas Hubel talks about. And I would just be interested in your experience of that as you've made your own journey.
Well, I appreciate you asking that. In 2018, I applied to be Elizabeth Dole Foundation Fellow. And the reason that I made application for that was because Elizabeth Dole was the first name that came forward in awareness of caregivers and family members of veterans. She had been at Walter Reed Army Hospital with Senator Bob Dole, the late Senator Dole, in 2011, when a lot of the veterans were coming home and listening to these family members who are having such struggles. And she said, this is not okay. We need to address this at a higher level. We need to address this at a more political level and some fundamental changes in the system level. And so in 2018, I became a fellow for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. My husband happens to be the 2022 Oklahoma Fellow. But together we have advocated at the state and federal level for change in the Veterans Administration, as well as awareness of things going on in the Department of Defense. There's over $220 billion allocated by our federal government for the Veterans Administration. And, I often shake my head and wonder where all that's going, because if you try to navigate that system, like if you're a sick veteran, if you try, and a little over 50% veterans ever sign up for those benefits. So, and it's because it is so complex and because of all the tentacles that are involved with it. So we have a lot of work to do. And that's why I also appreciate this opportunity. It's kind of what you were talking about, the Holocaust or the Vietnam War, or some of those things that they're just kind of, they're uncomfortable or they're controversial. And so they're often in the background, but they are the constant, timeless thread of shock and trauma, the undercurrent of it, that we have the opportunity by speaking it, languaging it, to move through it differently, to acknowledge it and to open our hearts to meet it with compassion and advocacy.
Yeah. Well, this raises in my mind just a quick follow-up question to you, Stephanie. I was astonished to hear your statistic about 80% of the children caught up in some kind of neurological impairment, particularly in autism. And I was just thinking and feeling in my heart, it's tough enough to raise a normal child. And then just imagine, everyone, if you've got PTSD and then you have a child that's autistic, what that must be like, that taxes an already impaired system to almost a superhuman assistance of an impaired child. I mean, it just kind of, I don't know how to feel my way into as a father of two healthy kids, I can't imagine what it would have been like to be a veteran and then one or two of them being autistic, and how I would have negotiated that. And then you begin to understand suicides and alcoholism. I mean, at some point, the system just surrenders to the inability to cope. I mean,
well, I've worked with those families, Jim. I've worked with those families where and I will say, and that goes back to what I've stated at the beginning of this program, it is frequently, virtually inevitably, the mother in that family where, I mean, this is a classic situation. There are variations, but frequently it is the dad that returned as the deeply distressed, deeply disturbed, masking distress, masking disturbance father. The children who are missing that attunement, that attachment, that connection, and then the mom who is making up for all of that, trying to fill the empty father role for the children, trying to earn the living the father can't earn, being the super person without respite. I've been the clinician witnessing that situation. Jim, that was my mother. That was my mother. That's how I grew up. So not only have I been the clinician witnessing it, I was also the child experiencing it.
My God.
And then I'm the one who wrote this book, because that awareness
Yes.
all came together for me. And I acknowledged in that process, because I wrote another book as a result of that, New Frontiers in Sensory Integration, which is about neurodiversity. And what I realized in that book, which was the result of the clinical research I did in Oklahoma, is I recognized my own neurodiversity. So I now celebrate my neurodiversity, but I was burdened by it most of my life. All of the unique attributes of my creativity and my intelligence, I now celebrate. I've reclaimed that. That's what I offer in the programs that I teach, the route to that transformation, that alchemy. But everything I'm talking about, I have experienced. That is what happens. That is intergenerational trauma. That is epigenetics.
Yep.
We are all living with it. As Cynde said, this saga that Joe and Cynde's family has been on is an ancient saga. This is mythical.
Yeah.
This is archetypal. And we have the opportunity now to transform it through the awareness, through the articulation, through the use of the resources that will allow nervous systems to evolve. And I would say, and this is on a scale that I don't undertake, but I know others in this audience do, ending war, Jim. I know this is a commitment of yours.
Totally.
Ending war. This is going on right now for the children of every war. That's why I made those videos. I was part of a team that made those videos. I apologize for saying they're my videos. I'm part of a team that made those videos. So I want to be clear. I'm not solely responsible for them, but those videos are intended to address that situation, to
Sure.
make a contribution to help bring people more efficiently out of that traumatic repetition so that they can be present and transform the circumstances. Ending more. That's another aspect of the respite we all crave.
Yeah. You know, Cynde, just to build on that point, I imagine when Joe came home, you began to experience in your own way the PTSD of contagion. And it probably took you a little while to kind of sort it all through because it affects the entire family constellation. So the whole family has to actually go through the therapeutic process.
Most definitely. And that's kind of why I've kind of in retrospect looked at it in trimesters. So that first 5 years was my own shock and trauma. I mean, it was all that I could do to get up and meet the day. I mean, honestly, my intuitive sense, my sense that of beyond and my spirit said, even in that shock and trauma, you must find respite. You must find ways to renew. You must do what you can to find language to share what is going on, because as Stephanie said, and we both said, this is a timeless story. This is such a incredible time in history to be able to talk across continents and across time zones and across, you know, all any barriers about, yes, about the opportunity to intervene with that shock and trauma differently. So yes, there was a fallout to the family, and it's just now after these 17 years that we're being able to reconstruct our family system, because we have 5 other children and 10 grandchildren. So it takes the awareness, the open-heartedness, the speaking about it authentically, without blame, without judgment, but with open hearts to how can we move through this differently, with that hope that Stephanie's talking about of no more war. You know, maybe if we begin to really talk about it, maybe if we begin to acknowledge the ripple effect, we can move through it differently.
I love the trimester metaphor, Cynde. That's wonderful. That the
it's
rebirth.
a multi-year process. PTSD isn't something you just snap your fingers at. You've got to really engage, because it's a whole system transformation.
Exactly.
It involves lots of people. Lots of people. Wow.
Nalini, we haven't heard your voice.
Thank you so much, Cynde, for coming on today and sharing your story and your son's story and your family's story. It's far too many of us that can relate to that, I think, and in many different ways. I think everyone can in some way or another. The questions I did have for you, actually, Jim and Stephanie already asked, but I did have a couple more. I was curious, in your recipe for respite yourself, what specific examples can you give us of things that you maybe were really helpful at that time, or maybe in the various different trimesters, and what's helpful for you now?
That's a great question. In the first trimester, as I mentioned, it was what I knew, which was I went to my own therapist, who is also a minister. So she ministered to me. You were talking about that unique respite, Stephanie, for each of us. So she ministered to me in ways that I needed, and massage therapy. So in that first trimester, that was it for me. In the second trimester of Joe's return, where and Joe alludes to this in his conversation with Ronan Farrow, how blessed he felt to have a family that supported him. I had my husband and myself, so we were co-caregivers. In many of the situations, like Stephanie's mentioning in her own family, it's only the spouse. So Jim and I could play tag team, and in that second trimester, that's when I sought the Contemplative Retreat Center, where it was a silent retreat center. So I would usually Jim would say, did you want to go visit that place this weekend? Which was his way of saying, I support and will take care of things at home, because I can sense that you need respite so many times. And that's the wonderful part of languaging in love without judgment. He recognized, and I knew it came from love, that he was suggesting retreat for me, something that he knew would restore and replenish me. And so in that second trimester, a lot of my time was spent in that contemplative venue, and also with other caregivers. I began to build that community of caregivers that we didn't have to talk about what was happening, because we'd all lived it, and we could move to a different level of language. And in this third trimester, I continued to seek alternative methods of healing. The labyrinth has been a fabulous healing tool for me. Body work, exercise, a lot of the things that we all talk about, and then connecting with people. And for whatever reason, my journey has brought me back to a lot of the matriarchal and indigenous earth-centered movements. So availing myself always of what just opens itself up, and having the opportunity to do that because of a co-caregiver who can tag team. And that's my hope, is that we all, whether we're related or not, can become each other's co-caregivers. That we can encourage one another for respite, and we can do it in love and in compassion without harshness or judgment, and offer those opportunities unique, Stephanie, to what this person resonates with. Great question. Thank you.
No, thank you for that answer. That was masterfully crafted. Thank you. We did not practice this ahead of time, folks.
How many families are being served by your organization, Cynde?
At this time, we don't, because we don't track, because they feel safe, and the only way we track is through the Google Analytics. So we do know that anywhere annually from 80 to 100,000 people are visiting our website. Wow. And so it's the service is just coalescing all of the resources that we know of. It could be caregiver resources, it could be financial resources. There are so many veterans that are, as you know, homeless. We're coming up on a really powerful time, the anniversary of 9/11. We're coming up on a powerful time for me and Stephanie. Cody, who she mentioned, who's no longer with us, died by suicide on September 13th. He served in Afghanistan. and also in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So these things are just reminders. And so whether it is a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, the impact to our systems and this opportunity to acknowledge them and acknowledge them with open-heartedness, with this ability just to find language that transcends frustrations and angers and moves to the heart space, where we can reach out as collaborative, lifting one another up through it.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much. This has been very profound. And Stephanie, would love to have you just make a final statement and then talk about tomorrow a bit. But before we do, I just want to say, Cynde, if there's anything we can do at Humanity Rising down the road to promote or profile, you could do a whole program with the Joes of the world that are out there in the families, just to talk about what they're going through. We'd be very open to doing that if that's something that would be of value to you. Maybe that's something, Stephanie, we can talk about for a later program. But just to hear the voices of the vets and their families, just talking about it just as a family constellation for a week. I mean, it would kind of blow people's minds and really bring home the devastation effect of war and the devastation effect of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for the way you've gone through these trimesters by going more and more deeply into the mother, the sacred mother. And you radiate motherhood in a sacred way. So I just want to acknowledge that on behalf of all of us. So thank you. Thank you. Stephanie, a final word?
One request from the chat is if we could do a quick healing modality for closing.
Absolutely. It's in my plan. So as you can see today and tomorrow, we are stepping more personally into this recovery, antidoting burnout, redefining burnout, and creating an understanding that leads to a lifestyle of respite, a lifestyle that honors ourselves in terms of the precious beings that we are and our service, and balances that output with cultivating inner reserves. The Tara approach is all about that. It is claiming the origins, the exposome, the epigenetic deposit that has shaped our nervous system. And tomorrow you'll be learning more about how we do that, how we investigate that and alchemize that joyously and efficiently. And the energy medicine, the bioelectrical conductivity that allows for the transformation out of the epigenetic lineage into essence is fueled by the hands-on, the gentle, concentrated hands-on applications. I want to emphasize the family empowerment. Cynde and Jim, her husband, they have been so much about family support for Joe and model the health of that kind of support. Nalini, would you show that slide of me treating my mom? I want to share with you a treatment for that water element, the adrenal system, which is the first line of defense, really, when overwhelm occurs, and how we can be of service to our family members directly by learning these hands-on applications. So the slide that Nalini is going to show, this is the day after my brother's memorial. And I am treating my mom here for fatigue. And you can see that she is enjoying the treatment. So I am placing 3 fingertips right alongside the bend of the elbow. Let me back up a little and tell you that the bend of the elbow, and also by wrapping my hands around the bicep, I am activating a site. It's called sacred site number 19, boundaries. So this position, wrapping hands around the biceps, sacred site number high 19, this assists you in cultivating boundaries. So even stepping back enough out of that contagion, whether that contagion is trauma brought into the home or the news or the media or some toxic experience, by wrapping your fingertips gently, I'm not pressing, just wrapping your fingertips around the bicep or just sliding your fingertips into the bend of the elbow, you awaken the ascending yang energy of setting boundaries, of individuating and differentiating. Now, interestingly, a corollary, this is a treatment my teacher gave to me personally, by placing the ring, middle, and index finger, those 3 positions, in the bend of the elbow, right alongside the bend of the elbow, as you see me doing for my mom. And you can't see my other hand, but it is placed just above her shoulder blade. That's a difficult place for you to reach on yourself. You could reach it on someone else. It's sacred site number 3, and it opens the respiratory system, so allows you to receive. But you can do something similar by putting the palm of your hand on the top of the shoulder, which is that unburdening site, and your fingers will fall slightly below that, and that's pretty close to that site. There is a 4-inch radius around each site. There is no need to be absolutely precise in any of these applications, which is wonderful because you can feel free to not worry about precision and just be present to your contact. So 3 fingers in the bend of the elbow and the hand over the opposite shoulder, fingertips falling slightly below the top of the shoulder. Let's breathe coherently in resonance with one another as we release our fatigue together. And feel free to switch sides. It's not absolutely necessary if you don't have time to treat both sides. One side will release the other, but it's just an added bonus. Let's breathe coherently and allow the other side to benefit even more. Noticing the shifts in your system, the combination of holding these sites and the coherent breathing, and sealing the practice with the prayer in you, allowing yourself to come into alignment enormous gratitude to Cynde, to Joe, to Cody Green, to Tom McKinley, and all those. May they hear our love for them and let their spirits come home to the beauty of who they are. Jim, thank you so much for Humanity Rising, a platform for alchemy and transformation at this portal to the future. Thank you, Nalini, for your incredible support. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, my sister, Cynde, for sharing your wisdom today. Tomorrow will be a deep dive into how you can transform your own vulnerability to burnout to claim the precious essence of your purpose in being. Thank you all. You're muted,
Thank you
Jim.
so much, Stephanie and Cynde and Nalini. This has been a beautiful, beautiful, powerful session. And I hope that as many of you as possible can join our after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. We'll see you all then again tomorrow for our fourth and final session of our 4-day program on regenerative health. Stephanie, you are a true master. Cynde, you have demonstrated on behalf of us all the pathway to healing through the thicket of PTSD. So I just really want to acknowledge what you've brought to our community today. And Nalini, thank you for just your presence over the last several days and all the support that you're bringing to Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. That'll do it for us for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same station here on Humanity Rising. Bye for now.